Born on February 11th of 1860, Karl Denke grew up as the son of a wealthy German farming couple in part of what is now modern-day Poland. Little is known of Karl's early years, but it seems he was a quiet and soft-spoken child who fared poorly in social situations. It's unclear why, but at just 12 years old, a young Karl left his childhood home, never to return. In nearby Münsterberg, he became an apprentice gardener for a while, but after deciding that outdoor work didn't suit him, he quit and worked a variety of odd jobs before receiving a sizable inheritance following his father's death. It was with this inheritance money that Karl purchased his first plot of land, having bizarrely decided to take up farming. As you can imagine, given the amount of outdoor work involved, Karl found that farming didn't suit him either. So he sold his land for considerably less than he paid for it, then continued working odd jobs around Münsterberg whilst living in a small house there. Karl did okay for himself. He was a popular figure in his local community and even played organ down at his local church. As a result of his staunch piety, generosity, and friendly demeanor, Karl was nicknamed Papa Denke by the local townsfolk, and he became something of a surrogate uncle for some of the town's more wayward youth. If you were in need of something to eat, go see Papa Denke. Need a bed for the night? Go see Papa Denke. Late on the rent? You get the idea. By age 66, Karl had become a pillar of the community. Everyone knew his name, everyone knew his face. There wasn't a soul in Münsterberg that didn't know his rosy red cheeks and wide, warm smile. But the same face that everyone had come to love so much, it was nothing but a mask. A mask Karl wore to hide his true nature. Papa Denke wasn't the man that everyone thought he was, and his mask was about to slip. It was the night of December 21st, 1924, just a few nights before Christmas, and befitting the time of year, Papa Denke's house was seeing increased traffic from the city's most vulnerable people. It was such a good service he provided, what with the streets being so dangerous. More and more of the homeless were going missing every year now, vanishing from the recesses they'd been banished to, never to reappear. Some said the last place their missing friend had been seen was Papa Denke's house. But that made all the sense in the world. He was a charitable man. Many of the homeless darkened his door on a nightly basis. Besides, such a man of faith wouldn't have it in him to hurt anyone, would he? But that same festively frosty December night, a passerby heard something as he walked past Papa Denke's house, something that made his blood run cold. It was the cry of a man who knew he was about to die, a kind of blood-curdling mortal lament, the final sound they might ever make. The passerby burst into Denke's house, terrified that the man himself might be under attack from one of the very people he was trying to help. But instead, the passerby quickly encountered a young vagrant, still on his feet for a moment, despite his head just about being cleaved in two. When asked who'd inflicted such a terrible wound, the dying man managed to utter two final words before he expired. Papa Denke. Realizing he had stumbled into the den of a sinister and surreptitious predator, the passerby immediately fled Denke's home, headed straight for the nearest police station. Once Denke had been arrested, a search of his house revealed the hidden identification papers of a dozen missing people, plus various items of male clothing that were so small they could be categorically ruled out as belonging to Denke. But by far the most disturbing and incriminating discovery was to be made in Papa Denke's kitchen. Police located two large vinegar barrels, each containing large chunks of what looked a lot like pork. Denke seemed to be in the process of pickling some gammon for the winter. At least, the police were hoping it was gammon. Yet when they discovered the butchered corpses of up to 30 of Denke's victims, it became clear the Münsterberg police had a cannibal on their hands. What's more, Denke had made the mistake of writing down the names and ages of his victims in a small notebook, along with the dates of their murders and the parts of their corpses he was pickling. The scope and scale of his operation was horrifyingly clear, and it's obvious that the pickling process was intended to allow Denke to savor his victims for months to come. But the questions of what made the man so deranged in the first place and why he was compelled not to only kill, but consume the bodies of his victims, those police were anxious to answer. Unfortunately, they never got the chance, as Papa Denka would use a secreted handkerchief to hang himself in his cell on the very first night of his arrest. He was obviously deeply ashamed of his actions and was unable to face the backlash and consequence of those. But just how much Denka had to be ashamed of was only revealed after his death. It had turned out that not only had Papa Denka pickled and eaten his poor vagrant victims, he'd also fed other people their remains. The vast majority of the homeless folk who visited Papa Denka were given small jars of what he called pickled pork, small, highly nutritious chunks of protein that could last Munsterberg's hungry for a considerably long time. But it wasn't pork. It wasn't ever pork. Papa Denka, Munsterberg's happiest, holliest, friendliest citizen, had been feeding the homeless to each other, and had been doing it for years. Needless to say, it wasn't a very Merry Christmas that year in Munsterberg, not for those who knew the taste of Papa Denka's pickled pork.
Hey everyone, we truly appreciate your support. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel for more upcoming stories and exciting content.
Not really sure how to begin this, and my title may make more sense after reading my experience. I'll try to be as brief and concise as possible. It was the summer of 2004. My family was supposed to vacation in Kennebunkport, Maine. My father was stuck in meetings, so he was going to come up from Manhattan a few days after us. My mother wanted to drive up, which super annoyed me at the time, but we didn't have much of a choice, so me, my brother, and my sister loaded up into the car and started that drive. I was about 14 at the time of this story. The drive itself was uneventful, but there were various delays and we ended up getting a lot later than we originally planned. Because of this, the owners of the house we were renting had turned in for the night, and we weren't able to get a hold of them to get the keys to get inside. It sounds like horrible planning, but apparently they were pretty strict about the time frame to pick up the keys. My mom, who was unfazed, decided that she wanted lobster, so we all went to one of our favorite spots. She called my dad to see if he can make reservations at a hotel in Kennebunkport from New York while we ate. We were just enjoying the lobster while a guy came up and started chatting with my mom. I figured it was just a friendly local making conversation. During this, my dad calls my mom, and my mom excuses herself to speak to him. Apparently, all hotels were booked for the night. Go figure. A height of the vacation season in Kennebunkport. The plan was for us to drive to the nearest town and just find somewhere to stay until we picked up the keys for our vacation home. Apparently that local had been listening to my mom's conversation and came back over once she got off the phone. I want to say first that there was nothing outwardly off about this guy. He was preppy, clean cut, unassuming, and fit in with the clientele. He told my mom that he had a big home with a big guest house we were more than welcome to stay with. His wife wouldn't mind. Immediately, my reaction was like, F that. No way in the world I was staying at a random dude's house in creepy Maine in the dark. My mom, doing her due diligence, determined that this guy was legit. He said he was in finance, and my mom was an investment banker. They chatted long enough for my mom to determine that he wasn't totally full of it. I called my dad hysterical. He said that I was overreacting and that I needed to get out of the city more and just accept that sometimes people are just nice. So my brother, sister, and I got into our car and followed this man back to his house. The guest house was really nice, fully furnished, but the beds were oddly placed. The guest house had 2 bedrooms, and instead of the beds being located in the middle or center, they were right under each window. It just seemed out of place. So anyway, fast forward. We're all getting ready for bed, and my mom hears a knock on the door, and it's that guy. He said he just wanted to check to make sure we got all settled in. Cool. Nice thing to do, I guess. Then about 30 minutes later, he comes back to check in again. At this point, my mom was like, thanks, we're good. We'll stop by in the house in the morning to say thank you, etc. Fast forward another 30 to 45 minutes. I can't sleep. I'm terrified. We hear this rustling, which is odd because the guest house was nowhere near any trees or even close proximity to bushes that might cause such a noise. At this point, I see my mom wide awake, look up out the window, like motioning towards the window with her eyes. Let me add, none of the windows had curtains. The guy said it's because his wife was in the process of redecorating. When I looked up there was a male figure just standing. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I don't know how long he was standing there for. When he walked away, my mom waited a bit, then told us to get our stuff together. She wasn't messing around. We had my dad on the phone at this point. He was pretty much flipping out at my mom about something, but I didn't hear what. My mom said she was going to go put the stuff in the car and to follow her out. This was all around 2 a.m. When we got into the car, we pulled around to the front of the main house, so my mom could return to the key and say thanks and just get out of there. However, when we got to the front, all the lights were off. Not just all the lights, but it looked like no one had been home. Porch light, table lamp in the front windows, everything black. Also, the 2 cars were gone, and which we presumed to be his wife's car. After seeing this, my mom at this point was pretty unsettled. She said that we were just going to leave and proceeded to drive to the gate. The gate at the end of the driveway had been deadbolted and padlocked shut from the inside. It wasn't a super strong gate, so my dad just told her to rev it. Thankfully, we were in a big SUV and just got out of there. We drove straight back to New York City, not speaking the entire time, and we have never returned back to Maine. My parents still refuse to speak about it to this day. I ended up asking a family member about it one night when he was drunk, and he said, "Oh, they didn't tell you?" The actual owners of that house were on vacation. I'm assuming my mom or dad followed up with one of the local authorities and figured that out, but never told us that. I don't know who that man was, or what he was planning that evening. I was curious as to whether there were any known serial killers or murderers who were in that area at the time, whether traveling through or whatever.
I was working late at the office one night. We have a big 2-story building in a business complex, and sometimes if we have to catch up on work, we kind of have to stay late. I had taken 2 sick days the week before, so I really had to get my project done and didn't have much time left to do it. I planned to stay a few hours this night and a few hours the next night to get caught up, leaving anywhere between 1 and 2 a.m. Often others would be there late as well, but this night it was just me. I was working at my desk, which was in the middle of a whole room full of desks. As I typed away on my laptop though, I started to get a little drowsy, and after fighting it for a bit, I got up to make some coffee in the break room. I started the machine and leaned against the table, barely keeping my eyes open as it slowly poured into the mug. But a sudden thud shook me awake. It sounded like it was downstairs, but it was really loud, resonating through the whole building. Nothing followed the sound though, it was just the one thump. I walked over to the doorway and looked out at the stairs, debating whether or not to see what it was. Honestly, I was so tired, I thought it had to just be something falling in one of the rooms downstairs, and chose to not investigate. I grabbed my mug and went back to my desk, continuing to work. I sat there for an hour, non-stop working, but the coffee really wasn't fixing my sleepiness problem. I kept working though, trying to power through it, but I was only prolonging the inevitable. At some point, I dozed off at my desk. When my eyes opened, I remember being immediately irritated and somewhat dizzy, like I'd been annoyingly woken up from a deep sleep. As I regained my senses though, I noticed a sound coming from somewhere in the building. It was a beep, sounding every 4 or 5 seconds, but was very faint. I looked at my laptop, seeing it was nearly 2 a.m. I decided it wasn't worth trying to work anymore, so I packed up my things and brought them with me as I left the room, to both check on the beeping and to leave afterwards. As I got to the stairwell though, The beeping started to make me nervous. I'd never heard it before, and there was something eerie about it. Maybe I was too tired before to fully comprehend it. I walked down the staircase, and now with the beeping much louder, I peered into the long main hallway. At the far end, there was a metal rod laying on the ground, right in front of the open entrance door. I felt blood rush from my face, knowing it should be locked up, and realizing the beeping was from the building security system. With nothing but instinct to go off of, I ran down to the opposite end of the hallway and out the back door, getting in my car to call for help. Although I was out of the building, what I learned next was far more terrifying. Police pulled in and searched around, not finding anyone or anything, and that's when we checked the security cameras. At 11 p.m., a man could be seen walking up and breaking the door open with a single hit from some kind of tool, creating the bang sound that I heard while getting coffee. He then quietly moved around the first floor and up to the second, where he came into the office I was in and stood quietly only a few feet behind me while I was working at my desk. He then went back downstairs, coming up again while I was sleeping and walking around the whole office, even going right up to me and searching around my desk. It's not clear if he stole anything, as there weren't cameras in every room, but there didn't seem to be any obvious answer as to what he was doing there. After seeing the security tapes, though, I've never stayed alone at that office again.